Project setup. It's really important to understand that there's so many options to consider when you're creating a brand new project in Unanet, and whether it's done automatically from an integrated third-party tool, or it's copied from a template within the GUI of Unanet, or you just create it manually by a contracts manager or a project manager. Really, to create a new project, the user must have that project manager or the administrator role. And of course, the whole purpose is to ensure when your users enter time in a timesheet or an expense report, the transaction is captured and associated with the right elements, and options are limited as much as possible to ensure error-free input. That's really the goal. So let's go ahead and get right to it. We're going to go ahead and go into the demo system and look at an actual project and talk it through. All right, so I'm in my Unanet demo system and logged in as an administrator right now, just to be able to show you the different fields of a project. You know, a project is in Unanet, it's a work or a collection of works to which multiple people report time and expenses. So all the time reporting, the expense reporting, and resource planning must be performed against what's called a project in Unanet. So therefore, projects must be established in order to track direct, billable contract work, as well as any indirect work, such as overhead, G&A, and fringe. They collect time and expenses and from resources. Unanet administrators and project managers may manage, which means edit, delete, disable projects via the project maintenance screens we're about to look through. So these screens are comprised of several sub-screens that allow for the management of project attributes such as the period of performance of the project, budgeting fields, the ability of access for time or expense charging, report management. So let's go ahead and start with the project profile. I'm just going to pick a project here, my very first one, hitting the edit pencil here, and we're going to go and look at the project profile. So the first thing I see on my screen is this project status report. The project status is a field that can be created during the initial configuration of your Unanet instance, and it's a status of the project, and it's totally customizable, and it's initially configured by the admin. If the project is in the concept or proposal phase, let me pull down my objects here and show you the examples that I have in my demo system. But if it's open or in the contract stage, so it could be in the proposal stage. It might be a proposal or a B&P string that you might use. These terms are really can be whatever nomenclature that you choose you want it to be. Project statuses are used in reporting to choose projects. Other examples might include the closed, which is a default, maybe pending, or ones that are planning or opportunities. So you want to consider the project status similar to a workflow or a state that a project might be in. A given project can move from a pending to a planning to open to close as the project progresses. So all the project statuses should be assigned an attribute of either active or inactive, and you can see that listed here that each one of them is assigned either active or inactive, and that helps again in reporting for just those projects that are active, or including the ones that are inactive, or just the ones that are inactive. The project condition, this is an optional field that you can use. You can leverage this field in project reporting. If you use it, you need to identify policies in what makes a project go from green to red and to yellow, and the definitions of what each of those colors might mean. The condition is visible in reports such as the metrics comparison report and the status report. The owning organization here, if the financial organization property is turned on, the owning organization is a required field on the project, and the organization must be a financial organization. So owning organization, it's a really very useful way to categorize your internal groups of divisions, departments, lines of business, and more. The owner organization is also, if you're billing in Unanet, the remit to entity for a billing project. It's who is receiving the payment back in your company and recognizing the revenue for that payment. The project organization, each Unanet project must be associated with a project organization, which typically, as a best practice, represents the customer or a customer. The project organization is often used in project reports, and the relationship is known as the project organization, which is also sometimes the billing organization. The list of available project organizations is defined by the administrator at the admin organization screen. So all time and expenses charged to a project are by default also charged to the associated project organization that you decide upon here. The project organization must be a customer of the same legal entity which the owning organization belongs. And again, the best practice is designated by the project or the customer. Really, it's the customer designation. The project code itself here, it's the value that's entered as a code. It must be an intuitive such that users entering time or expenses will recognize that code on their timesheet or their report. The project code must display, and really the organization and title are really optional. And the code must not contain any spaces. So that's why you see here there's underscores in between the verbiage words. The project type is a field that's typically used to categorize a type of a project, and it can be used to define the type of work that's being performed. It may have an attribute that's set up by the admin setup, which determines if it's a billable type of project or not, and it is set up in the initial configuration by the administrator. And it can be a tool to be able to distinguish reporting on different types of project. The most common, looking at metrics for billable projects versus non-billable projects versus your lead projects and internal projects. The comment is, again, an optional field to adapt additional information about the project. The manage at task level. This setting requires that a work breakdown structure, or task in Unanet terms, are loaded in each project and the assignments are made at the task level. This can be really helpful if not all the members are assigned to a project should see or log time and expenses against all tasks. Requiring tasks for time or expense reporting. This is a setting that requires the user to select a specific task for that time and expense reporting in a timesheet or expense report. And it's really useful if manage at the task level is turned off, but users assigned at the project level, since they're still required to choose a task. So we'll move on to our budget tab here. The budget tab of the project really allows you to set aspects such as dates, budgets, percent complete, probability percent, and completed date. The budget fields are available at the project level and at the task level that we'll see for categories of hours, labor bill, labor cost, labor burden cost, expense bill, expense cost, expense burden cost, you'll see here, along with those date ranges of a project. The term budget is really used throughout the Unanet product. Based on its context, it can mean different things. For example, in some reports, the budget refers to the person assignment. So these are the budgets that are associated at the overall project level. The budget information here, it's not required information, but it really is helpful to gain full use of Unanet project costing reports, as well as some time and material performance reports to review the project and tax budgets and compare them to actuals. The next tab is the accounting tab, and the first one here you see is the billing type. So in Unanet, the billing type determines how we bill and recognize revenue for a project. And the examples that we have in our system are time and materials, which is TM, firm fixed price, which is fixed price, FP, and then, of course, cost plus. So the billing type value drives the billing and revenue for the project and how that's calculated. The billing type is different from the project type in that the project type determines whether or not something is billable. You can have, for example, non-billable costs on a cost plus contract if the billing type is cost plus, but the project type is non-billable. So CP will base billing and revenue upon direct billable labor and expenses, indirects, and a fee if there is one. Time and materials, T&M, will base billing and revenue on bill rates and billable hours as well as billable expenses, which may or may not have a markup included on those expenses. And then finally, fixed price will base billing upon fixed billing items or revenue either on a billing of those items or a custom schedule or even a percent complete. Now you can have a hybrid of time and materials and fixed price projects by setting the value at the task level. So you can have a time and materials project with some fixed price task and some time and materials task, or you can have a fixed price project with some tasks that are fixed price and some tasks that are time and materials. But what you cannot do is combine task level cost plus with task level fixed price or time and material projects or tasks. But we do now have the capability of combining all three types of contracts or projects on an invoice billing out to the customer within Unanet. The posting group here is a newer feature in Unanet along with the financials, and it determines the default posting group that will be set up and used and looked at the project level. The cost structure is a mechanism to be able to identify the indirect rates that would be applied to the overhead, especially for cost plus contracts or just looking at any burden rates for your labor cost. It applies the rates and the calculations or the formulas associated with calculating those rates in the accounting reports. And the system code here is available for an additional identification of any account codes that you might have in an external third-party system. Now the total value, funded value, this limits the billing and or revenue funding to the funded value. This is a new option as well in 10 and 10.1 to be able to limit billing to the funded value minus any fee and limit the revenue recognition to this funded value less any fixed fee. Now the fee here, we do have the additional capability to have multiple types of calculation methods. So a single project can now have multiple fee calculation methods. And the system will support fixed fee amounts and generate either fixed fee cap adjustments when the fee is exceeded or recognize unearned fixed fee when a project is marked as completed. The fee calculation methods only apply to cost plus projects, and these methods are really disregarded for any time and material and fixed price projects. Let's move on to the Access tab here. So the Access tab is closely tied to the person profile and the organizational access as well as user access. The administrators, as a best practice, we do recommend leaving all of these boxes checked. Doing so means that when you grant permissions in the person profile and the organizational access for those roles, that those permissions will apply to the project. In other words, by selecting boxes on the Project Access tab, you're allowing users with a related organizational access to access this project as long as they have access to the project organization to which the project belongs. You might want to elect to uncheck a box on this tab if you have top secret or clearance projects for which you would like to tightly control access. So when you uncheck, the person profile for the organizational access will not grant permission to this project. But really, as a best practice, we do have most of our customers and users checking all of the boxes, so the organizational access at the person level will be applied. Now, the user access section here, you may elect to allow users to plan themselves or assign themselves from the plans. These are options, but the key setting for users is the self-assign. And we recommend leaving the self-assign unchecked so you can control who can charge to the project via people assignments. If it is checked, then all people will be able to charge time to the projects, and you really can't control having any kind of a budget in comparison to that because it's open for all people to charge time. So moving on to the Time tab, there really are some key things that I wanted to be able to point out to you for specific rules related to the project. Allowing future charges. This is the ability to designate if you want to charge time in the future. If you're going to be, or you have a requirement to be DCAA compliant, you would want to uncheck that allow future charges. The allow time reporting, you're just allowing users to charge time in a timesheet for this particular project. A reason for not allowing time reporting is maybe a project is just allowing expenses to be charged to it for some reason. And then for your PTO and vacation holiday projects, you'd want to designate those specifically as leave projects. You have the option to require comments in the comment field or not. You also have the option to require the location to be entered into the timesheet or not. and then you can define the default location for this particular contract. It might be this work would always be located and worked in Alabama, and that would be the default location that would show up. Now, the key here for the default pay code is you could set the default pay code to be, a normal one or a regular, whatever that pay code string text is, and that's defined by your administrator in initial configuration. And that would limit at least the default, the original pay code to be a certain item. We also have the ability to require or not require time in, time out setting for the project. Usually it's determined by the user setting, but we could require it for everyone or not require it at all. Now, as a best practice, we do recommend having the ability to have labor categories usage on the project. And when you do allow labor categories, it's our best practice to have the bill rate source come from that job role labor category. So that's the negotiated rate you have for this project or contract. And then the cost rate would default to the person's cost rate. They're literally their salary of what they are, because that doesn't typically change based on the contract, but the bill rate is what you've negotiated with your customer, and that would be defined at the labor category level. So for expenses, we're just here checking to allow for expense reporting against this project or not. I have some customers that have a multitude of a series of projects. Maybe there's one project for time reporting, one for expense reporting, and so you would allow the opposite to not have expense reporting that's only allowing time charging and vice versa. Now, one of the tabs here that is forgotten sometimes is the alert tab here, and the project alerts, it allows the project manager thresholds for values on this budget tab in order to notify the project administrators that are specified here. So project alerts can be configured at either the project level or at the task level. And you can use the default premises and percentages, or you can change them specific to this particular contract. It can be configured in 3 places. Initially at the admin setup for the whole Unanet system, and so when you check the use default preferences, it will take those master settings from the initial configuration. Then checking the custom box here, you could modify again for this particular project. It really is a reporting mechanism triggered when the budget items are input in the system and these percentages are met, and it's a great way to be able to see those and identify and let the project manager know you are at these different thresholds. And the project manager can then come in and set them to 85% or 95% to keep monitoring that, and it's an automatic trigger in the system. The last tab on the profile is the user-defined tabs here, and they are UDF fields or user-defined tabs that are available and can be set up in the admin setup. You have the ability to have 10 on many of the different objects in the system, and at the project level you may have 10 here as well. There are different types of UDFs in the system. There's a pick list, there is a textual string, there's a date, there's numeric for calculations. So I think there's even there's a hot URL now where I can put in a website and have clickable to be able to go outside the system into a location for a URL. So do know that you have the ability to add up to 10 user-defined fields on the other tab, and they're reportable by ad hoc reports. So let's go on over to the left-hand side here for tasks. So tasks are really work activities under the project level. They can mirror a project work breakdown structure or WS from another system or a project planning tool, but it can be built in Unanet as well. So you can see here you have the ability to import or export tasks, and you can copy tasks from other projects in the system. And we do have a link here to be able to import tasks and export time on a task to MS Project. And you also have the ability to set up dependencies as well on systems. So you can see here I've got a parent task of QA with dependencies set up for our child task of unit tests and systems tests, and then change request, which is not a dependency here. And I can tell I've got dependencies right away when the dates are grayed out. So tasks allow for more granular charging of, while still allowing the feature of the many of the options that are available at the project level. So at the task level, you have the additional fields available to manage at the task level, such as the budget fields, cost budget, bill budget, funded value, hours budget, a labor bill budget, labor cost budget, etc. And I can report on those by selecting the record columns and listing. I also have the ability to, 2 tips here, to be able to save the criteria of this report, or this listing really, to a dashboard, and always be able to come back to this work breakdown structure with the additional fields that are identified here. So that's a great advantage, as well as the double edit pencil that allows me to make edits all in one screen to all of the editable fields for each task, as opposed to going into each task and going to the different tabs and updating the budget or the percent complete, etc. So a couple of tips there is using the edit field, double edit pencil to edit everything in one place, and then saving the criteria of this work breakdown structure list. And I can say, content production, work breakdown structure, and save that to my home dashboard. And then all I have to do is go to my home dashboard and click it, and it will show up here with all the additional fields, edit, hit the double edit pencil, and edit. So just another trick for that. Now, the Administrators tab is, once a project's been created and saved, the Administrators tab can be accessed to assign other users for the different roles. So I could assign project approvers if I had a project approver for this particular project that I wanted the time to be approved project by project. Maybe I want a project lead to be assigned to be able to edit task information and budget information. I may want to assign a resource assigner here to be able to assign resources or even plan resources or request resources at the project level. And it would grant access for those roles to be able to act upon this particular project content production. So note that the people with the appropriate roles might be granted access to projects via the organizational access in their person profile, or here at the project level here in the Administrator section. So the accounts is, there's numerous accounts available here to be specified at the project level, and with the new command center, or the project costing command center that we have for our financials, you can determine what the account is at the project level or at the task level or the organization level. So here's the one that you designate where the accounts are, the account description and the numbering for the different categories here. So billing, this is set for billable type projects, and there's an invoice setup area here to determine the invoice specifics. If you're invoicing out of Unanet, we have the concept of having a standalone project, invoicing creating one invoice for this one project, or grouping multiple projects together and designating what those multiple projects are, and having those actuals report on one invoice across multiple projects. In addition, you must have some contacts set up for at least who you're going to bill to and remit the payment back to. And we have a new additional ability to email our invoices directly out of Unanet now. So that's a new enhancement. We can have an additional formats designated for projects, so I can have a summary format maybe on the first page with a detailed format showing timesheet comments on a secondary format. And then the ability to edit any specific things that you want for this particular project or contract and have that show up on the invoices created month after month or time period after time period. And they would always show up. So this billing section here, there's other areas here. If you have a fixed price project, this would allow you the ability to set up the billing schedule or percent complete schedule and revenue recognition specifics. And if you also had pre-billed labor that you'd want to designate as a retainer situation. Now, one of the things I did want to talk about is expense types and labor categories and locations. You have the ability to import and export those expense types, but the great thing to note here is you can specify a subset of valid expense types that are only applicable to charge to on this particular project. If you remember correctly, at your admin setup area, we'll go to the admin setup, you have expense types here, labor categories, the locations, and pay codes here that's set up. And there's a master list of them. Let's just take a look at the expense types. There's a master list of expense types. So this is set up at the Unanet wide. So when you go to project by project, you do have the ability to narrow down those choices of expense types that you're going to allow on this particular project, such that if I only allow, airfare and dinner and entertainment and lodging to be allowed to charge time on this particular project, oops, airfare, maybe cell phone, dinner. So these would be the only expense types that I would have available for this project for anybody to pull down in their expense report and charge time to. I could also change project by project or contract by contract what the master markup is, and maybe change that specific to the contract negotiations that I have, change it to a 6% or 10% or 0%, or even make it non-billable by doing a negative 100%. So we can do all these with labor categories, with locations and pay codes to really just narrow down the options that are acceptable and available for this particular contract or project in Unanet, all in the realm of really narrowing down the options for the timesheet and expense user to charge their time and charge their expenses to only the correct expense types and to the correct labor categories and correct locations, pay codes, etc. So hopefully that makes some sense. Plan sets. Plan sets, if you're preparing cost proposals or bid and proposals, opportunity projects for expenses and resources, a plan set can be used and designated if you have what-if scenarios that you want to be able to plan different scenario options and learn about reporting of costs and what the revenue might be or your profit might be. You could have multiple scenarios as plan sets here and designate those when you're doing your people plans and your in your system. You can also plan with a grid, or list those plans or assign plans here, the soft booking of resources in the B&P or the proposal mode, and then once you've got a designated plan with all of the costs and labor category and bill information set in the system with the budget of hours, you can assign those plans. Same thing with the expense plans as well. You can plan in the system for expenses against the project. And then the assignments, expense assignments and expense budgets are the authorization for those people charging time with the labor hours, labor categories, bill rate, cost rate, all the associated information, and charging time and all that's calculated and collected against the time that's charged in the timesheet. Same with expenses as well. So if I list assignments here in the system for this particular, I've authorized these people to charge at this task for these dates as the labor category with these bill rate, cost rate, and the organizations identified for recognizing revenue for the person organization, the cost element for executing project accounting reports for overhead costs, and a budget of hours if I wanted to have budget of hours at the resource level. So this is the authorization for people to charge time. The notes area here is an area where you can add, attach, really the key thing is add additional information about the project, risks. We use this internal unit for reference processing, for statuses, for consulting, lots of different note types that we've identified for our projects as well as the status, so it's sort of a workflow as well. It can be assigned to someone to work that issue or that review or identify that risk or lessons learned, and I have completed dates, when it should be completed, when it's due. I can even limit the access to it by allowing access by role, so not everybody can see the note and the contents. And as with the project, I have the ability to have user-defined fields up to 10 associated with a note. And again, it can be a pull-down pick list, it can be a numeric date, it could be a URL. And finally, the key thing here is the ability to attach files, any kind of files, Word docs, Excel spreadsheets, emails, etc., to the actual note. So this is a great way to be able to have collaboration on the project, store files, statement of works, any artifacts that are associated with the project or contract. And then from the project, you do have some reports that are available, the status report, the Gantt report, and be able to look right from the project and look at the status report and understand where we are, and then drill right back down to that project with the drill down. The Gantt chart will show at the task level, our dates based on the begin date, end date of each task that we have in the system, and the actuals charged to date. And then the margin graph, which is great for time and materials projects. We do need to narrow down the date range on this one, I believe. But you can see as a trending and graph for margin for time, for cost versus bill. And then if you're doing earned value assessments here, there's ability to do earned value. This particular project really needs to be narrowed down for its date range. Certainly not from 2004 to 2017. So that's what I wanted to review today for the project setup and all the different fields. It's really important to kind of understand all the different options that are available to you and really make good use. Now remember that some of you have this automatically imported for your third-party systems. Some of you might be copying from a template, which we can do. If I go to my list of projects again, I do have a separate organization, a pending group organization that has some templates, proposal templates or system implementation templates, some template projects with a work breakdown structure that I want to copy for new proposals, for new BMP opportunities in the system, and I would go and copy all of the specific things about it and maybe modify a few tasks or date ranges, etc., and then have my cost plans there associated with it when I'm off and running. So it's an easy way to do a copy project from those templates, if you will. So I think I'll stop talking now because